We've got a banger for you today, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to Football Therapy with me, your host, Jan. I hope you're doing well. I really do hope that. Welcome back to Chelsea News, of course, the daily series. That's right, here on the channel where I reflect on what's being said about Chelsea across the global digital sphere, giving you my opinion on it, but more importantly, asking for yours. Today, three stories we're speaking about. Nizar Kinsella speaks about the injury crisis Brighton are enduring ahead of their game against Chelsea at Stamford Bridge. Christopher Nkunku's Chelsea return will steal the headline, but Christian Davis writes the £58 million Romeo Lavia will be equally transformative for Pochettino, which is potentially very exciting for us Chelsea fans. And I really want to talk about an opinion piece on the site Phillips Substack from Will Rayner. He speaks about how potentially Chelsea could be facing a transfer ban. It's an opinion piece, it's speculative. It's not based on any news, I don't think, but I think it's interesting. I want to talk about that as well because, of course, Chelsea have been stacking up young talent, and we know that Bowley, Clearlake are preempting sanctions on Chelsea ever since they've purchased the club. So lots to get into today, really seriously interesting stuff, I think. If you want to show your support, please do like and subscribe. I'll thank you for joining me as always, and let's get into it. So go check out site Phillips' Substack. I'm not going to read this article, but Will Rayner writes, I used to interact with him on Twitter when I used Twitter. By all accounts, clever, insightful Chelsea fan. He cites some, at the time of signing, non-first team starters. So signed as just young players. Gaga Slanina, Cesare Cassidy, Carney Chukwuemeka, Jimmy J. Morgan, Alex Matos, Angelo Gabriel, of course, playing in Ligue 1. Andre Santos, Diego Moreira, also in Ligue 1, Amari Hutchison from Arsenal, David Datro Fofana over in the Bundesliga playing for Union Berlin, Samuel Smith, David Washington, Leslie Ugochukwu, and Kendry Paez, who's yet to arrive. Of course, he will arrive when he's 18. In the first team, we have seen the likes of Carney Chukwuemeka and Leslie Ugochukwu play, of course, a few minutes as well from David Washington. But with potential add-ons, that's £151 million of players that aren't being bought to be played right now in Pochettino's 11. Now, of course, the reason for this is almost certainly Chelsea's Project 2030. That's to do largely with business as well as building a team for the future. But it's a really interesting opinion piece because when Todd Bowley and Bedadig Bali Clearlake purchased Chelsea, they looked over everything. We've spoken about it at nauseum. They were really sort of disappointed with the lack of data Chelsea collected in the Abramovich era. They think as an elite sporting enterprise, we really weren't doing our due diligence with that. But also, they found so many financial irregularities in the history books that they deemed could be dodgy. Of course, this is the stuff we're dealing with now with the allegations they self-reported to UEFA, the Premier League, and the Football Association. By the way, if you can hear a noise outside, the gardeners are here on the estate with leaf blowers, so hopefully that doesn't become an issue in this video. Anyway, so they self-reported all these issues. Of course, we know UEFA agreed a fine with Chelsea, £8.5 million. Chelsea were like, yeah, no issues, mate, we'll pay that. But I wonder, and this opinion piece from Will Rayner, are Chelsea preempting a transfer ban? And is that why they're locking down loads of young talent that they can loan around, the Championship, to the Premier League clubs, and indeed European clubs, of course, sending like Moreira and people and Gabriel off to Ligue 1? Are they thinking, right, well, this transfer ban might happen this season, next season, in a few seasons' time, if we're prepared with a network of young talent for the current manager to pick from in terms of a pool of talent, like, okay, well, we can't make signings for a while. This player's out of contract. This player wants to leave. This player's injured for long. You want to evolve in terms of the team you're playing. You can't sign players. Of course, Frank Lampard before called on Tomori, Tammy, Reece James, Mason Mount, all these youngsters on loan in the Championship. Maybe this is kind of like our version. Now, this is not me saying Chelsea are going to have a transfer ban. This is not even me saying Chelsea are preempting, but it's an interesting thought exercise. And the fact how I read that, I was like, yeah. I mean, it would be like a interesting, protective, like proactive thing to do. Like, well, of course we can sell these players. Like, you know, you look at the likes of Andre Santos and Cesare Casadei. They've probably doubled in value since they've signed them. You could say the same for Kendry Pires. They intelligent scouting business acquisitions, but also they could play on the team. But maybe if there is an idea in their heads that maybe, just maybe, we might get a transfer ban, then that could be a really smart move as well, especially with the amount of young players. And, you know, you don't know when a ban's coming. So if you've got a bunch of old guard that are on their last legs, you're not in a good position to deal with a transfer ban. But if you've got a wealth of like a talented young army to call upon from Europe that you already own, you are in a strong position. Now, this is, again, speculative thought exercise in theory. I'm not saying at all this is the situation. And even if it's true, you might think, great, but it doesn't matter when you're just going to finish mid-table every season anyway. It's all sort of like by the by. Which brings me on to the next part. We'll talk about the Brighton injury crisis in a minute. Of course, they're the team we're playing next. But lest we forget, we just played a team with an injury crisis and they slapped us up 4-1. But how are Chelsea going to evolve? I'm going to move over now to this article on goal.com by Davis talking about how Lavia could be transformative. So this is really interesting, I think. Because I've done videos about him recently and no one's really thinking about Romeo Lavia because everyone's talking about Nkunku's return because Nkunku is an attacker. And Davis writes this: the focus is on the Frenchman as the pair return from injury, but Chelsea's forgotten man, Lavia, can be just as crucial to their success. So Nkunku and Lavia have endured full starts to their respective Chelsea careers, both struck down by serious injuries before making their competitive debuts in a crushing blow to Pochettino's hopes and plans. Their recoveries have followed a similar trajectory in the months, and since, coincidentally, they seemed to make their long-awaited debuts around the same time. So they're both coming back at the same time. There is a disparity, though, in the anticipation surrounding each player's comeback. Unsurprisingly, Bundesliga goal and assist machine Nkunku's imminent return to fitness has generated plenty of excitement among a fan base that has been starved of attacking productivity in recent seasons. True, but Lavia has become something of a forgotten man. Yeah, this guy cost a lot of money, remember. It's not helped by the fact that the 19-year-old is yet to put on a blue shirt. Now he's finally on the cusp of making his bow. This £58 million man, $74 million, will be determined to remind everyone about what he is all about. He's still only 19, he got relegated with Southampton. There's a reason probably why people aren't thinking of him, but this chap thinks otherwise. World-class potential, such has been the length of Lavia's absence, you would have been forgiven for forgetting just what he's capable of. Remember as well, Liverpool really wanted him. You know, they were going to pay £45 million for him, maybe 50 or 55. But at that point, Lavia decided he wanted to go to Chelsea. In fact, it was a fun, you know, remember when football was fun before we were kicking actual football was when both Lavia and Caicedo were choosing Chelsea over Liverpool and informing Klopp they don't want to join. Feels like a world away now. But it takes something or someone special to build a reputation and command such a significant transfer fee, despite being part of a team that, of course, got relegated in Southampton. Plucked from the City Academy production line for what seemed like a costly £14 million, 1-4, just over a year ago, the Belgian emerged as one of the signings of the summer amid Southampton's struggle last campaign. Demonstrating the precious confidence and technical ability you might expect of a youngster moulded in the famed Anderlecht and City academies, his evasiveness under pressure, ball-carrying ability on the eye, and eye for a pass, were outstanding. And I have said this before, he's a little bit more like a Kovacic player, like dribbler, like press resistant, plays out of the press, plays between the lines. Kind of, you know, we don't have that in Gallagher, Enzo, or Caicedo, really. Maybe a bit in Caicedo, but Caicedo seems to be a sitter for us. But despite all of that, he is a defensive midfielder by trade, ranking in the top 15 players in the whole league for ball recoveries per 90 minutes, and making more tackles than any other teenager. Well, that's the, you know, when you're top of the tree for something, you know, a guy for his age. I've got ball recoveries. I mean, we've got Gallagher, who's like the best in Europe in theory. Of central midfielders aged 22 or under, he's ranked third for interceptions behind only new teammates Caicedo and Everton's Amadou Onana, who excels at ground duels. Yeah, by the way, Amadou Onana, he's a little bit erratic, but I said this like at the beginning of last season or when Frank Lampard was using him, like, he looks amazing, that player. Amazing indeed. Strength and depth. The presumption has been that Lavia will have to settle for a place on the bench once he's regained match fitness, with Pochettino having previously admitted, although in jest, he's got pressure to field both Caicedo and Enzo Fernandez because of the money they cost. However, Lavia will have designs on a starting place and will hope to give his manager a decision to make. If he can replicate last season's form, that it won't be an easy one. This is the big question. Can £60 million midfielder Lavia find a starting place in a midfield that until Newcastle seemed like, yeah, that's the midfield we want, you know? Whatever conclusion he comes to, though the Argentine tactician will be delighted to have another quality option at his disposal, despite their astronomical outlay, Chelsea have somehow still looked light in central midfield beyond regular starters Gallagher, Fernandez and Caicedo. Yeah, well, to be fair. With Pochettino forced to call upon 19-year-old Leslie Ugochukwu, whose games are significantly less developed than his teammates. Yeah, and Ugochukwu's look good at times, but I guess you want midfield options, don't you? You want to have that, like, midfielder you turn to. Like, when Chelsea are playing a double pivot, you know, say we were playing, like, Jovic or... I can't mix the names. Kante, Jorginho, Kovacic. They were playing in a double pivot, so, if, you know, they'll always have one coming off the bench. And, you know, we've always had that kind of extra player, you know, and I guess, like, when you're playing a three-man midfield, you don't really have that, like, extra player that can offer something different, a different profile, when you're trying to do something different. Leslie Ugochukwu is very similar to Caicedo. He's not as good as Caicedo, he doesn't have as much to his game, but he can do the same defensive stuff as Caicedo, in theory, whereas Lavia brings something different. Alarm bells would have rung for Chelsea followers as soon as Ugochukwu was named in the starting lineup against Newcastle. Yeah, he wasn't great, but no one was great. But Lavia, either off the bench or as a starter, would provide far more assurance. So they're both teenagers. They're both 19 years old, I believe. But would he, though? Solution to craziness. Lavia certainly won't be making up the numbers then, with Chelsea's lack of quality and depth having been compounded by 3 international breaks since September. In an era where recruitment is driven by data and analytics, something of an oversight when the Blues spent $220 million, of course, on Caicedo and Fernandez when they're constantly going to South America. So neither Fernandez nor Caicedo have found their best form this season, with both drawing criticism, having regularly looking a little sluggish. Yeah, and of course Lavia is from Belgium, so he wouldn't be flying to South America constantly. Their case certainly won't have been helped by jetting off across the world to represent Argentina and Ecuador 3 times already this season and returning just days before a domestic match day. Pochettino himself, a former Argentina international, has noted as much, but with limited options, he's forced to play them. He says this, quote, "It's crazy for players to come back from South America on Wednesday and play on Saturday. Today, Caicedo and Enzo arrived 2 games in America and were not fresh, but they were important players for us. It's really tough to arrive like that." Yeah, so of course Lavia will, just as a European midfielder, offer something different, you know. Tactical fluidity, this is the final part of this. Oh no, it's not the final part, second to last part. Indeed, once we've given the opportunity, there's every chance he will seize upon to nail down a starting place for Lavia in the Chelsea side, potentially having a fundamental effect on the way Chelsea play. Wow, big claims here, and providing his manager with a new wealth of tactical options. Pochettino has built his reputation on a high-intensity approach in a 4-2-3-1 formation, but he also deploys a 4-3-3 on occasion. Given the Blues' trouble of the back of late, having a second defensive midfielder along Caicedo would provide much-needed stability. So switching to a 4-2-3-1. In theory, Enzo should benefit as he's relieved of his defensive duties, with the 2 exceptional midfield destroyers doing the dirty work. Well, that is... Look, man, if you want to play a 4-2-3-1 with Lavia and Enzo at the base in a double pivot, that in theory sounds like a really good double pivot. But then if you're going to do that, what do you do? Play Nkunku in his favoured best position in the number 10? Suddenly you're dropping, Conor Gallagher, arguably our best player of the season, and you're dropping Enzo Fernandez, World Cup winner. Matt Law thinks he's got the highest ceiling of any Chelsea player. Tough. I mean, good problem to have, of course, but very, very tough. Before we talk about this injury crisis from Brighton, what do you think? I just think it's so interesting, this Lavia situation, because he's a forgotten man. I keep talking about him, so I haven't forgotten about him. But I'm so intrigued because he is a completely different profile to the other Chelsea players. So, yeah, let me know what you think in the comments below about Lavia. How much have you watched of him? How much do you believe in him? And do you speculate he could be a difference maker because he's a different type of midfielder, and that means Chelsea can play different types of football? 60 million quid from a player from a relegated team. Bearing in mind Maddison cost 40 million, and he's got loads of productivity going the other way. So it just shows you the premium there is in defensive midfielders at the moment. Very, very interesting indeed. Right, let me know what you think about that. Let's talk about this. So Kinsella of the Standard writes, Brighton could be without 11. That's right, ladies and gentlemen, 11 players for their trip to Chelsea this weekend after De Zerbi ruled out both, thank the Lord, Ansu Fati, because he's starting to get good for Brighton, and Tarek Lamptey, which is great because, the narrative is just waiting there. The duo came off injured, of course, in the first half away at Forest. Brighton now have an extensive injury list which featured defenders Webster, Estepinian, and Estepinian's excellent, along with the versatile pair of Solly March and James Milner, and forwards Welbeck, Enciso, and Mitoma. Wow, there's a lot of quality players out. Speaking ahead of the Europa League clash away at Athens on Thursday, which is tonight, De Zerbi said Igor can play, Ansu Fati and Tarek Lamptey are both injured. We won't have them for a long time, but the focus is on the players that can play tomorrow. Yeah, so it's 11 players out. That's wild. The fact is, they have an injury crisis. They are playing Thursday night football, not Champions League, Thursday night football, and we would have had the whole week to prepare. There really is no excuses there. The excuses are gone. We've got less players out than them. Nkunku could be back. We're at home. I know we're worse at home, but in theory it should be better. They play Thursday night football and they've got 11 players out. And I just do not feel safe at all. And this is where we are, right, as Chelsea fans. This is where we are at the moment. Still, I'm going to wait until Pochettino's press conference, I believe, tomorrow, and we will do a preview of that game. We'll do a tactical preview and talk about how that can go down, who can play for Chelsea, and hopefully we see the likes of Nkunku. I think he's slightly ahead of Lavia. But in the meantime, let me know what you think. I look forward to reading the comments. I can't wait to find out what you guys think of Romeo Lavia in terms of his profile, what he could bring to the Chelsea team. Thank you for liking and subscribing, and I hope to see you back here very, very soon, friends. Take care of yourselves. Peace out.